Everybody, this is Mark Smith from Clean Connect, and I'm here with MaryBeth Clifford and Brian Kromer from Step to Compliance with another Methane Minutemen podcast. I don't know what Minutemen, but anyway, Minutemen podcast. Here we go, episode 3 on mandatory reporting rules, Subpart W. So take it away, guys.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. So if you're not familiar with the Methane Minutemen podcast it's all to help you with methane intensity and a fugitive emissions management strategy. So dealing with the Inflation Reduction Act, the ABCs of Quad O, how that's related with Subpart W, the changes coming there, and the current requirements. We have a methodology that deals in 3 parts with define and document, all the federal, state, and local rules that may apply that bring methane intensity under scrutiny, to identify an inventory down to region, basis, facility, and equipment and citation, what those actually do, and then to track and manage them on a recurring basis. And we hope to help impart some of this to you. So if you haven't registered, please register today for EPACheatSheet.com is the location to go. We will have 4 podcasts there, 4 slide decks, and even a 5th document around Subpart W, which I'm going to show you in a minute, that we believe is very valuable. But please, if you'd like copies of the slide decks to review these 10 to 15 minute videos, please go to EPACheatSheet.com.
Plus, you get obviously the EPA cheat sheet if you go to EPACheatSheet.com and the video walkthrough that I do. All right, take it away.
That's right. You bet. So this slide will be in the majority of what we're going to talk about. We call this, M to the 3rd power, because it's about methane monetization, methane measurement, and methane management. And it is the interrelation, and it fits like a puzzle, of not 1 or 2 regulatory acts, but 3. The Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically putting a tax and targeting those that report currently under the mandatory reporting rule. In particular, Subpart W deals with oil and gas activity. That's the audience that will pay the tax. And then methane management, which is following under the ABCs of Quad O. So the Inflation Reduction Act, as we've stated in every podcast, is a new tax that starts in 2024 at $900 a metric ton and going all the way up to $1,500 metric a ton, and really leaves less than 1% leak rate on the amount going to sale. So it's constraining things well below 1%, even though, let's say, the ABCs of Quad O are really only reducing your fugitive emissions by 95%. The fee applies even if you're compliant. That's why we say it's a tax. So today we're going to talk about the mandatory reporting rule and Subpart W in particular, which had revisions proposed last year. And because this is the target audience of the Inflation Reduction Act and where the tax is going to apply, it's very important that we understand what's happening with Subpart W. 2 core things are in those proposed pending changes. 1, the Inflation Reduction Act is not only targeting those that report today under the Subpart W in this industry, but it's going to transform how greenhouse gases are measured from emissions factors to empirical measurement. Whatever that means, it will take place in less than 2 years and is in the Inflation Reduction Act. And there's these pending changes for Subpart W, which were published last June, I believe. So we've created a document because how they were published really is difficult to read. So MaryBeth and the team took Subpart W language, did a strike through and an insert so that you can easily go through this and read what's pending for Subpart W. This document, again, will be at EPACheatSheet.com. Please register there to get the copy of the slide deck and that. And with that being said, I will turn this over to MaryBeth to start going through what's happening in these proposed changes with Subpart W.
Sure, thanks, Brian. So yeah, we're going to hit it at a high level and just go through some of the main things that are going to impact you all. So these are not yet adopted. These were proposed in June of 2022. They went through public comment. Public comment ended in December of 2022. And so we're still waiting to see these finalized and published in the Federal Register. Of note, though, even though these aren't adopted, the way that the language is written, it will apply to the 2023 reporting year. So even if these don't get published until later, mid-year, these new guidelines are going to apply to the 2023 reporting.
You mentioned public comment, MaryBeth. How many public comments were there to these proposed changes as compared to the 400,000 plus comments we see in Quad O, B, and C?
Amazingly, there were less than 100. There were 98 public comments submitted with regard to these amendments.
Sleeping giant.
Yes. So the mandatory reporting rule actually impacts quite a number of different industries. I've highlighted here the ones that are more specific to the oil and gas subpart C, where in the past stationary fuel combustion sources have reported under, the big one being subpart W for the petroleum and natural gas systems, and then subpart Y with petroleum refineries. And they are introducing a new subpart VV dealing with sequestration of carbon dioxide. But if you look at their table where they have to break out the burden of these new amendments, you'll see that the largest burden of implementation does fall to the oil and gas industry. So there's 10 different segments for subpart W that have to report under this. And this is the list of all of the different ones. And based on which segments you are a part of does change which equipment types and processes get reported. So it is important that you identify what your segments are and read carefully through any of the changes that will apply to how you report. So what's new? One of the big things that we've noticed that's new in here that relates largely to subpart, or I mean to NSPS Quad OB, is what's being called an other large release event. And under subpart W, we have this, and in Quad OB is the super emitter program, and those two are really closely related. One is where you're getting a notification about your emissions, and this one is where you then have to report your super emitter emissions in your subpart W. There's also some big changes coming to the compressor driver engines that have previously reported under subpart C. Those will now be reporting under subpart W and have a new emission factors table, which is table W9. And then there's also a new calculation for compressor driver engines to determine methane slip from those engines. So a little bit more complex in the calculations. There's new leaker emission factors. Some of those are being updated and some of those are being added. Those have changed significantly for anyone who is not using a method 21 survey method. And then equipment leaks by population count is changing in a lot of the areas of the reporting to use major equipment instead of the component count. So switching over to how many compressors, heaters, separators, et cetera, versus open-ended lines, connectors, valves. And then obviously there's some new definitions that are going to come into this as they clarify things and add like the other large release event. And then there's a few more new things. There's changes to the as found measurements for compressors, and they've added a requirement to report the total number of compressors by each category. And they list out different as found categories that have to be used for reporting. There's updates and clarifications to calculation methodology for flared emissions. This is going to really change up the approach to arriving at some of those final numbers. And then there's clarifications and adjustments to pneumatic devices and pumps. They've added dry seal centrifugal compressors, which of note, these are also being added to NSPS Quad OB. So it's dry seal are getting added to both the NSPS Quad OB and to subpart W. And then several sections in these proposed amendments reference the proposed. NSPS Quad OB, and the presumptive state standards that will be required from the emission guidelines Quad OC. So
we can, I was just going to say, we can probably go through the definitions quick.
Yes, these are in the slide deck for you. So if you sign up, you will get access to this slide deck. I've pulled them out to make it easy for you to reference, but they are lengthy. We're not going to read them out loud to you. So sign up, get your slide deck, and read through them. Just of quick mention, there are, several revised emission factor tables, and you'll want to sign up because what we've done is we've done the red line on these so that you can see what's going away and what's coming in that's new. Of note, W1B, W1C, and W1D will only apply to the current reporting year of 2022 and prior reporting years. Those tables will be obsolete starting in 2023 reporting. And just to give you an idea of how drastic some of these changes are, I've pulled the table W1A. On the left-hand side is the new factors. On the right-hand side are the current factors. And as you can see, they've gotten rid of doing it by region. So there's no longer the Eastern US and the Western US. It's all the same, no matter what region you're in. But they've also gotten away from doing the population factors to using the major equipment factors. So it's really become like trying to compare apples to oranges. They don't look anything alike.
And probably the most important table.
Yes, so this one applies, this is the W1E table. And we did go through and tried to take that apple and that orange and compare them to each other. This is for doing the leaker emission factors for onshore gas production and onshore gathering and boosting. And the first four columns where you see current factors and then proposed, current factors and proposed, those reflect method 21. And so the first two columns reflect if you're using a method 21 with a 10,000 parts per million as a leak definition, and the next set, if you're using method 21 with a 500 parts per million as a leak definition. But then if you're using any other methodology besides method 21 for your leak surveys, they have provided new emission factors. And as you look at those, they are significantly higher. We've done the math for you and shown you what the increase is. So you'll see everything. There's only one that decreased. That's the other category at the very bottom. Everything else increased by more than twofold and upwards to 9 in some instances. So this is definitely worth taking a look at to see how this is going to impact your 2023 reporting.
Well, and what it will do when the fee applies, because unless we've gone to empirical measurement, these higher emissions factors will create a higher tax.
Yes. So, and there's a few added emission factors tables that are listed here. Again, if you get the slide deck, you'll be able to get access to this and see what those are. But lots of new material that's coming out in this subpart W. It's unknown when it's going to be published, but definitely needs a thorough read through.
Awesome.
So, and here just a reminder that the new verbiage is going to apply to the calendar year 2023 reporting. They are making some special provisions for best available monitoring methods for 2023, since obviously there's not going to be time to implement any of the new monitoring methods that will be required, as it hasn't been finalized yet. But starting in 2024, those best available methods will have to be replaced with the actual new monitoring methods required in the rule.
Awesome. Well, Mark, that puts it back to you.
Yeah, so I see here, join us next time for the New Mexico Ozone Precursor Rule Preview.
These went into effect in January, but we'd like to discuss them because even though they target VOCs, they drive GI technology, leak detection and repair, and everybody needs to be complying with them now. It's either that or the Inflation Reduction Act or both, but at some point we're going to hit some of these state rules too. So don't forget to register at epacheatsheet.com. That Subpart W markup is there. And we thank you for this chance to present the Methane Minutemen podcast.
That's great. I mean, so just in summary, just kind of wrapping up, it seems like, with the increase in Subpart W, it really, do you think it's going to push people to figure out how to do empirical?
The Inflation Reduction Act is stating that it will go to empirical. And if we look at the factors and the adjustments in here, boy, there's enough incentive if you're using technologies that are more efficient than Method 21 and more cost effective to get on that empirical bandwagon. But I think in the short term, it's going to ensure that people are paying the tax.
Right. So anyway, that's one of the other things we're going to be discussing inside of the EPAcheatsheet.com is how to avoid the tax and all the things you can do to avoid that and to get on empirical measuring and to automate your compliance and all kinds of good stuff. So anyway, thanks guys for being here. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Brian, for bringing this update. And I look forward to the next episode.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, you can't.